Hello and welcome to Tracy Momey Reads. I am back today with another book review. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Okay, so let's dive right into it, shall we? So, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. You know, I read the blurb, so I did go into the book like knowing what it was about. This girl back in 1700 France, it was like the year was 1714 to be exact. And yes, you heard me correct, like 1700s. She lived in the countryside in France, and she essentially makes a deal with the devil or something like that, where she asks to be kind of relieved of her small, like limited, suffocating life, you know. And at the time she was only 23, but you know, back then for women it was, life was a whole lot different. You know, the expectation was that you were to marry and bear children and that was about it. You know, you weren't going to have a life outside of that. And she just did not want to go down that path. So she summons one of these gods that like an old lady, you know, in her community had told her about. And one of the things that she told her was never to pray to the night gods or the darkness gods or whatever. And she got so desperate because she was, you know, about to have to marry this man that she didn't even really know and that she didn't even care about. But because she was 23, she basically was a spinster, and her parents just basically gave her away and said, you know, you need to marry this man and become a mother to his children, and hopefully you can have children, you know. So she runs away from the wedding, and she's like just begging and praying for this person to appear, and he does. And they strike a deal. You know, I will give you your freedom, the no attachments, you know, this type of thing. And what the deal entailed is that whenever she was done with her soul, so like when she was tired of living, he got her soul. He was going to get to, you know, take her soul, because I guess that's what those kind of devils or dark gods do. They collect souls. So, you know, he waves his magic wand or does his thing, and she wakes up the next day and she quickly finds out that there was some fine print. You know, there was nothing to read, but had there been anything to read, it would have been in very small, undecipherable text, because she didn't want any attachments, so to speak. He made it where nobody remembered her. Right? So, you know, she goes back to her house, you know, where she lives with her mom and dad. They have no idea who she is. It's like she never existed. Like she wasn't even born, you know. Nobody, even the old witch lady who, you know, told her about praying to the dark gods, she didn't even know who she was. So that's kind of where the story, you know, it starts off like present day, and we meet her. She's like kind of had this one night stand with this guy who doesn't remember her the next morning. But we don't know like what that's all about until you get, you know, to the next few chapters. And that's what happened. Like when she made that deal, like basically, and the way that it worked, I thought it was really interesting. Like if she met someone, okay, let's say she walked into the room and she met someone. And this was the other thing. He took away her name. So she couldn't even, like if somebody said, hi, what's your name? She could not even speak her own name. Like he like took away her existence, basically. She was living, but like she wasn't leaving a mark. That was the caveat, because she didn't want any attachment. So if she were to walk in and, you know, you say, hi, what's your name? And she makes up a name. Hi, I'm Lori. And if you left the room and came back, like as soon as you were out of her line of sight, you totally forgot her. So that was the thing that kept happening. It's like somebody would go into another room and come back and like, who are you? How'd you get here? After they had probably just had like an hour-long conversation with her. That I mean, as a reader, it was frustrating. So I can't even imagine living a life like that where you just have no impact. Like you're that forgettable, like within seconds, you know. Now, of course, because we're talking about somebody that was born in the 1700s, and when this book opens, I think it's like 2014. So, you know, she has lived 300 years and she hasn't aged. So he gave her that. It's like basically she's immortal. And she also, like, she can feel pain and hunger and all of those things. But if she didn't eat, I mean, she feels like, oh, I'm starving, but she wouldn't die, you know. And there were a couple of times she had bruises and scrapes and she was in pain, and like they started to immediately fade, you know, that kind of stuff. She was like Wolverine pretty much. But and so, you know, going back to the fact that she's like technically 300 years old, you know, that's what I was like, oh my God, how has she survived this whole time? You know, because think about it, if you try to get a job, if you get married or any of that stuff, soon as that person turns the corner and they come back, like, what are you doing here? You don't work here. Who are you? You know, my wife, what are you talking about? I'm not married, you know, so like you're essentially almost like a ghost or a figment of someone's imagination. And so that was the crust of the story, just kind of getting Addie's backstory and how she survived in the 1700s all the way to 2014. And you know, it took her some trial and error, but she finally kind of got into the rhythm of, you know, learning the parameters of the deal that she made. And the guy, well, I don't even know, he's not a guy. I guess he's some kind of deity or something. She called him Luke, L-U-C. That was the name that she gave him. But he took on the form, you know, when she was younger, she had drawn this image, you know, of a guy. She was a, you know, an artist or whatever. And she had charcoals and stuff that her dad had given her, and she would draw pictures and stuff. So he took on the form of this person that she, I guess, was thinking was like the perfect guy or something, you know. In her mind, she kind of conjured him up. So whenever she, you know, saw him, he would appear ever so often. And, his goal was like, you see how hard life is. You're having to do, you know, things to survive. You're, you know, having to steal because she can't really make a living because she can't go work anywhere. It's like every day she'd be starting over, you know. And, you know, Luke would come and like, okay, so are you ready now to surrender? Because he couldn't just take her soul. She had to say that I surrender or I'm ready, you know, to let it go or whatever. But he underestimated Addie because she was stubborn as hell. And she just did not want to concede to him because she felt like he had not betrayed her, but led her astray by not giving her all the finer points of what that deal entailed. So yeah, and the other thing, like she couldn't have any, you know, like if she wrote her name or if she bought a pair of shoes, well, not bought because she didn't have a job, but if she stole a pair of shoes, which that's how she ended up kind of surviving. You know, she realized she could steal stuff, but anything that she kind of owned or had, it like faded away because she couldn't leave a mark. She couldn't have anything tangible. But there was a line in the book, it said, she can steal because a successful theft is an anonymous act, which is the absence of a mark. So that's how she kind of, you know, ended up like finding a loophole in the thing. Like she became a very crafty young woman, like kind of staying in the shadows or, you know, introducing herself as someone else because she knew that the person wasn't going to remember. I mean, you know, if they ended up leaving the room and coming back. So if they left the room and came back, she would be gone, you know, but she's already taken what she needed to take. Now, the only irony is that nobody can remember her, but she can remember everything. So that was another little detail old Luke did not tell her about. So, you know, the story goes back and forth from, you know, Addie's story through the ages, you know, from the 1700s to the 1800s. And there was all these little actual historical events kind of interspersed in there, like, you know, the war that happened in France, you know, they were saying Paris is burning. She met some historical figures, and I thought that was pretty clever that, the author did that to, give it some, a little splash of reality, right? To make you think you're really reading about a real person. But then like in present day or 2014, she goes to this bookstore. She lives in New York is where she is now. And she meets all these people, and again, they forget her or whatever, but she goes to this bookstore and there's this guy in there, his name is Henry. And she tries to steal a book, and he follows her out and was like, what are you doing? You can't have that. I saw you steal it or whatever. And then when he realizes that, like, what it is, like, he just lets her have it and tells her to have a good day, right? So she realizes the book is in a whole nother language. She speaks about 6 or 7 languages. I mean, 300 years, you kind of pick up some things. But she wanted to take the book back. She was going to go in and act like someone had given it to her as a gift, and she was going to exchange it. Well, old Henry called her out on it because guess what? He remembered her. Okay? And that is where, it's like one of those things where you just kind of like reading along, say, oh, okay, that's interesting. Oh, what a good. And then when that happened, I was like, how does he remember her? And from that point, I was like, okay, I need to finish this book because I need to find out, how does he remember her when everybody else forgets her? So I had a theory early on. I was like thinking, because it was weird, like Luke, the darkness of the devil or whatever, the presence that he took on in front of Addie was a drawing that she did, right? And when they described Henry, it seemed like he was almost a muted version of that because, Luke was just like super attractive and had these piercing green eyes and this dark hair and all this stuff. Well, Henry had black hair. It was kind of curly, green eyes, but he wore glasses and, he was kind of bookish and unsure of himself and, all that kind of stuff. And I think he's like 29 or something. So at first I was thinking that Henry was actually Luke and that he was like, trying to play a trick on her. But we were getting so much of Henry's backstory. Like he actually had friends and a family. So I didn't know. I'm like, did he possess his body? What's going on? But then of course, as the story goes on, I started wondering, did he maybe make a deal with the devil too? And that's what happened. So their spells or whatever kind of counteracted each other. She's been alive for 300 years and never came across somebody that remembered her. Other than Luke, which, let's take a sidebar here. Addie and Luke had quite a weird relationship. Because he would check in on her every year. Like they had an anniversary. And then it was like 10 years and it kind of spread out. But I think at first, he thought it was funny, or just was like intrigued that Addie was being so stubborn and wouldn't surrender her soul. Then there was points where he got annoyed with her for doing that. And then he started admiring her, for sticking it out, even when he made it hard for her with some of the things that he would do to try to sabotage her. And it turns out, like, Luke does become very enamored with Addie. I mean, in whatever way that a demon can become enamored with a human. But he told her that she wasn't human anymore. So even though, like, she still had a heartbeat and she could still bleed or whatever, it was like she was more immortal than human. Like, she was totally not scared of him, except for a couple of times when he revealed his true form, and the way it was described in the book, it was kind of scary. But it was almost like they were, those tropes in the books, enemies to lovers, like, you felt like, okay, this is leading up to something. What is happening here? Because it was just too antagonistic, but also there's this simmering attraction, right? But, and that, like I said, that's what was happening as we go, back to the past. And then she was telling the story of like her travels and how she ended up coming from France to America via like a lot of other stops in Europe, before she actually landed here. But then in present day, like she's falling for Henry, And I think it was more so because it was the first real connection she made, in her 300 years of life. So I was just really like, what is this Luke Henry thing, And Henry's deal, I'm not going to spoil that part for you. I won't tell you what his deal was that he made with Luke, but he did make a deal with Luke. Just like Addie was kind of like drawn to Henry because he could remember her and everything, Henry was also drawn to her because his deal or the thing that he made with Luke didn't work on her. So they were like actually seeing each other, remembering each other, and getting to know each other for the actual person that each of them was. So it was a very quick escalation to becoming romantic partners and being intimate, like over a course of a month or two, I want to say. And she continued to find ways to kind of subvert her curse, as she came to think of it. Because like I said, if she wrote her name, it would disappear. But if Henry held a pencil and she guided his hand, then it left a mark. Again, that was just another way that she became, I think, enamored with Henry. I feel like some of the relationship was genuine, but I think that both of them were just caught up in, oh my God, okay, here's some reprieve from, that curse that I've been under, that spell that everybody's been under, since I made that deal. Another thing that I thought was cool, the author not only gave us historical tidbits, she put some historical figures in the story that had also struck a deal with Luke, like Joan of Arc and Beethoven and Shakespeare, and in the end, he took their soul, but it was for them to be able to have, be remembered and have all this renowned success or whatever. The only thing I will say about the deal that Henry made is that he wasn't as clever as Addie. She said, you can have my soul when I'm tired of it, but there was so much change and so much stuff going on, and she was so young and had been so sheltered. Even when things were hard, her desire to see more, do more, be more outweighed any hardships that she had. So she never got tired, even after 300 years of living and being in New York. Like, they were finding stuff she had never seen or never done or experienced. Henry, bless his little heart, he just, his deal was only for a year. he only made his deal for a year. And at the time that he meets Addie, like, he only has like a month of that deal left. So what's supposed to happen after his deal is done, Luke is supposed to come and take his soul. So when she finds this out, oh my God, she summons Luke, because he gave her this ring, and that's how she can, like, call him, or he'll come if she puts that ring on. And she, ripped him a new one and, told him it wasn't fair and this and that. But there was a thing that he said in there, because she thought she was clever, her and Henry both. They thought that Luke had made a mistake, like in that, not knowing that their paths would cross or whatever, right? Where they would meet someone who they would have this connection with. But he kind of orchestrated that. And even though Addie didn't think that, he was capable of love or caring about her, it makes me wonder, because he wanted, like, for all of his talk of, like, trying to keep her isolated and keep her like she didn't matter, and he would say little nasty things like that to her. It's like he gave her this experience of being able to deal with this man who could remember her, who, made her feel seen and all of these things. And he, like, said he did that, like he knew about it. So I'm wondering if he did that, like that was his gift to her, But anyway, so as the book wraps up, Addie, after ripping Luke a new one, and she starts to plead for Henry's life, and Luke is just like, no, he made a deal. A deal's a deal. I'm taking his soul as soon as this is done. But then he came back with a counter offer. And It was one that Addie took. And, it's hard to not tell you the offer. So this book came out, I think in 2020 or 2019 or something. And I can't imagine there's someone out there who has not read it. But if you haven't read it, I don't want to spoil the ending for you. But what I will tell you is that The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, the title comes from a book. So it's a book within this book that was written by Henry. Okay? So that may give you some indication as to the deal that Luke made with Addie for him to spare Henry's life. The way that it ended, me and these endings, right? I feel like, even though I am not a sequel person, I would read a sequel to this because there needs to be a sequel. There needs to be a sequel because, down to the last page, like there's still some plotting going on, some still wanting to hold on, and not being ready to let go. So I just wasn't I mean, even when the deal was done, I just thought it was like an acceptance thing. And okay, we're just going to go off into the sunset. And that's the end of that. But just based on the commentary, it seems like you want to know what happened. Is there more? So yeah, they said that the author said that she does not intend to write a sequel to this book. So I guess it's just one of those things where you just kind of have to imagine maybe what happened. Overall, I mean, I really, really enjoyed it. Love the historical aspect. Love the, the back and forth with the past to the present, and kind of showing how that relationship with Luke unfolded. And there was just so much detail given with Addie's deal and how it affected, her life and her lack of making connections. The last thing I would say there, I thought it was pretty cool. There's like 5 parts to the book, and there's these things, like you can see that there's pages like this, and there's like a drawing or illustration of art or manuscripts, and that are in museums, right? And all of them are things that Addie had a hand in, or she was the muse. So even though she couldn't leave a mark, there were some people, even if they thought it was a fever dream or something, there was something that she inspired, because the thing that Luke told her, which he didn't mean to tell her, is that an idea, if you give someone an idea and they run with that, like one guy wrote a song because she had, every day they kept starting their relationship over, but that the lines to the song, he ended up finishing it. And in the song, he said it was like a girl, I can't remember, a girl I used to know or something like that, and it was a drawing at another museum of her, but it was, her face was kind of turning, like there were these, she had 7 freckles, and the person drew that, and it was like mystery woman. So there were all these little Easter eggs that showed she wasn't so, invisible after all. So anyway, yes, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Really, really enjoyed it. Overall, I give this book, I wanted to give it 5 stars, but I'm going to have to give it 4 because, come on, she just left us hanging, I feel like, with that ending. I needed more from that ending. But overall, fantastic read, and I would highly recommend it. If you haven't read it, you may want to go ahead and get ahead of the feature film that's being made about it. Yes, it's being made into a movie, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. If you have read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I would love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. And make sure you like this video and go ahead while you're here and subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much to everyone who has already subscribed. I sincerely appreciate it. You guys have a great weekend. See you next week. Bye.